Hey, I'm Jakira Black and this is a video about critiquing your own story, critiquing someone else's and how you do it, what things you look for as you read their story and that you can comment back on. So first of all, characters. How many characters is there in this story? Who are they? Is there a main character? Is there more than one main character? Who are the side characters? What sort of things do they do? Is there an antagonist? The thing is, it's important that we think as we're reading about, I mean, obviously not when you're reading a normal book, but if you're reading someone's story to critique it, then think about, the fact that how your character acts, how the character acts, it's just like you think about that and you use them for creating tension. So yeah, who are your characters? Maybe map them, or like use Excel to sort of map them, sort of do a chart on what sort of things happen to them throughout the story, character by character. Do they all go through a character arc? Do their arcs have a beginning, middle and end? Are there characters that are set up at the beginning that or later on that aren't ever used again? What's the point in that? Could you maybe have the character that you talked about at the beginning appearing later on? Just map them as they are and see what you want to do, and or comment as you're doing a critique for someone else on who they are, and give ideas of how they could maybe sort of adapt their character, or if the characters work, if they're a likable character, if you think they need to be changed, if they don't need to be changed. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, obviously, I'm sort of like saying that you might think about the characters in a totally different way, and you might think, oh well, if I think about the characters as I'm reading this, and you think about the characters and you might come up with totally different sort of things that I would come up with, which is what we need when someone is critiquing our work. It's what we need. We need someone to identify the things that we have not seen, because quite often, like for an author, we're too close. But the thing is, by critiquing other people's work, maybe we get a little bit better at critiquing our own. So another thing to think about is dialogue. Does the dialogue work? Are you good at dialogue? Is the person good at dialogue? Do they have too many dialogue tags? Do they use things like the video I talked about yesterday? He shivered, do they describe too much? Do they repeat information in the taglines that is pretty much obvious? Do they say things like he growled, instead of just saying he said, because you're not supposed to do that. I know at school they say, don't just use he said, use other words, be more creative. No, don't. That is not what authors are supposed to do. Authors are supposed to use said and not any other words, because it's just lazy writing, and it's not an idea that that teachers should necessarily be teaching, or at least not to want people that might want to be authors, because it's annoying. Point of view. Who is your point of view? Have you got more than one character in a point of view? Have you got a narrator? Unreliable narrator maybe, or one that is all-knowing, first person point of view that you just see what the character sees, and obviously critiquing that is you know, highlighting bits where maybe the author has wrote something that the character would not have been able to see because they've got their back to it or whatever, so therefore it needs changing, adapting or deleting. Maybe they might be experimenting in using second person. They might have multiple characters whose POV is looked at. They might be doing third person with narrative distance, so that sometimes the narrator seems to be far away from the action, and sometimes they seem like they're actually in the character or characters' heads. Yeah. So another thing to look for, and this is something that I do struggle for, and that is narrative voice. Does it flow? You know, is the story readable? Is it something that, you know, just flows along and there's short and long sentences and it's like more or less poetic maybe? Or, you know, has the author found their voice? What is a narrative voice? I think maybe I need to explore that quite a lot because I don't actually quite get it myself. So yeah. So next, setting. How many settings are there? Does the author describe the settings? Is there maybe too many settings? Or some settings just sort of settings that the character is passing through and doesn't necessarily need to be there? Like, for instance, someone rings the doorbell and the author has wrote about them going from their bedroom to the top of the stairs and then down the stairs and down the hallway to the front door, when they could have just skipped ahead to them opening the door. Because the thing is, yes, you sort of like, you think, oh, well, I should really write all those details, but those details are actually quite boring. So maybe highlight them and don't have them. Because the thing is, when you think about it, they're actually telling as well. They are, maybe, anyway, they could be telling because you're telling what's happening instead of having action and dialogue. So, I mean, for instance, I read a book last year, or it might have been the year before actually, I think it was. And it was a book that is quite hyped. And it was a book that I didn't like because it had characters going up and down stairs in this silo where there was like 100 floors, and the author had gone into great extensive information about these characters sort of going up the stairs and going down the stairs and dragging their feet up, but they weren't talking. It was just about them walking up the stairs, and it was like, I don't care. I really don't care. Stop with the stairs. So, setting. Does every setting need to actually exist, or could you skip ahead? Ideas. What is the idea behind this story? Can you work out what the idea is behind this story? I think maybe if you're critiquing it for someone else, then one beneficial thing for them would be for you to give them some sort of clarification about what you think the story is about, what the idea is, what the possible theme could be, because that's going to really help the author to maybe rewrite the story even better, but have an understanding of the story and see things that they've not seen. Structure. What is the structure? Is there a distinct beginning, middle and end? Is is there maybe a circular structure where everything turns full circle? I like using Damwell's 7 points technique. I use that quite a lot, so that's an idea for structure. Is there a structure to the story, or is it messy? Could the writing be improved by having a more defined structure? Plot. What is the plot? And has the author lost it? I think some people would say I have. Yeah, just sort of like, I mean, that goes very much with the idea as well, and the theme. But you know, what is the plot? You know, maybe sort of writing a brief overview even for the author of the different stages of what has happened, so they have that, and hopefully they'll have done that themselves. But obviously, someone else's different insight might help. Language. How does the author approach language? Do they use contractions like won't, can't? Do they have a character that maybe doesn't use contractions, and is that deliberate? Do they have a character that might stammer? Or I had a character once in a story who kept talking in rhyme. So, you know, could they have someone who's talking in rhyme? Or alliteration, or, you know, constantly saying sort of things about, you know, something just to... A story I wrote recently, set in Roman times, had a girl keep saying about Zeus and praise Zeus and this Zeus and that Zeus, and I wrote that because even though she probably wasn't that religious, she was making out that she was. So, you know, and then that sort of like defines the person. Is there similes? Do you avoid cliches? Because we really shouldn't be using cliches. You know, things like too many cooks spoil the broth. What does it mean? I mean, yeah, we know basically what it means, but the meaning itself has really been, you know, or the source itself has been really lost in the passage of time. And it's lazy writing to use cliches when you could actually come up with your own description and, you know, sort of actually show the too many cooks spoiling the broth. You actually have, you know, maybe someone cooking and actually ruin dinner because there's too many, and there's sort of like someone runs into someone else and the food goes everywhere. And yeah. Style. And this goes with narrative style, or narrative voice. What is the style? Because everyone has a style. I am better at dialogue than description. Now, I can describe. I can. You know, I don't have any problem with actually describing things, but it doesn't come naturally to be writing the descriptions as I'm writing the story. So sometimes I have to go in afterwards and do descriptions. And that can sometimes feel a bit bland and weird, and yeah, just sort of like doesn't quite gel. So, you know, is the style working? You know, is their descriptions working, or do they need to do extra work and have more action, or, you know, do they need to work on tightening up on the dialogue, whatever. Genre, which I can't say. What is it? Because obviously there's lots of genre. I mean, when the course I'm doing, they talk about genre like it's poetry and fiction and creative non-fiction and script writing, and that's one definition of genre, but there's also science fiction and fantasy and historical and crime and dystopian futuristic and so many. What do you think this story, the genre is? Help an author. Help yourself if you're critiquing your own story. You know, from reading it, what do you actually think? Reader engagement. Now, this is something that an author who has written the story isn't necessarily going to be able to do. But if you've read a story for someone else, be honest about whether it engaged you. And say if it didn't. And maybe give some reasons why it didn't, if you can. So yeah, and then sort of like just put any feedback that you think is pertinent to the story that you've read. So that's how you critique. That is some things that you could critique, use, you know, as you're reading this story, you could think about, you know, and write some notes about. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. I will be back tomorrow to do another chapter of the self-editing book that I'm reading at the moment, but I just didn't feel like reading it today. So I did 3 videos instead. Bye.